So let's give a ranking out of 10. Chapter 3, Season 1. Spider-Man Mythic, snow on the map, tilted towers, vibes were great. That is a 9.7 out of 10. I'm telling you, it's a top 5, maybe even top 3 season of all time.
Great Fortnite seasons can be very few and far between, and while I like most of the more recent seasons that we've gotten in this chapter, there have been a large amount of seasons in the past 2 years that have been less than likable. I want to use this video not to create an in-depth review on each season of the game, but rather to give my rundown thoughts on each season and help you understand where I stand when it comes to how I perceive these seasons. Of course, if you don't agree with all of these, you're just wrong. I will be creating future videos on all of them to further explain my reasoning. Seasons 1 through 3 I kind of categorize into one clump, mainly because these seasons all happened very close together. Each season kind of improved upon the next with quality of life changes as well as different changes to the map that overall made playing these seasons more enjoyable. I would say progressively, Season 2 builds upon Season 1 and Season 3 builds upon Season 2. During this time, there was no such thing as stuff like seasonal map changes, so having a different map or having new map changes every single season wasn't something that was really introduced until Season 4. Now, Season 4 of Chapter 1 I would put in the amazing category, simply because this season did pretty much everything right. This season had a really good loot pool and a really good map. Double pumping was still in the game at the time, which was kind of a negative exploit, but considering I liked that more than spray meta, it definitely made playing this season really amazing. This was also the first season to introduce a storyline, as well as also having a live event, which definitely boosted the game's popularity by a lot. Season 5 is the first season that I don't think is quite great. It's not really a good season, mainly because of the spray meta. They introduced the P90 during this season, and also removed double pumping, which made spray meta during this season really bad. Now, I'm not going to put this in the bad category because you still had the cushion of the pump shotgun, basically making the game a little bit more playable, and the map changes during this season as well as some of the content were phenomenal. I'd put this in pretty much the top position of meh. Season 6 was a good season. I think it was slightly better than Season 3, but not quite as good as Season 4, mainly because I wasn't a big fan of the zombies, but the map changes during this season definitely were really good. The floating island was an interesting aspect, that having it kind of move around the map slowly during these games was something that was pretty new and definitely really interesting. So I'm going to put it in the top of the good category. Now, Season 7 was another season that kind of improved upon the previous ones. They kept pretty much adding new map changes into the game, and Season 7 updated another corner of the map with adding the snow biome. Now, the snow biome all the way around was amazing. The only reason I'm not putting this season in the amazing category was the fact that the plains were in the game, and they're just simply better seasons that do a very similar thing of having really good maps and really good loot pool changes, while not having broken things like the plains. Season 8 of Chapter 1 is one of my favorite seasons of all time. It's definitely better than Season 4, and this mainly has to do with the fact that the loot pool during the season and the map are phenomenal. I love the addition of a brand new corner of the map, and it just kind of shows the progressiveness and the evolution over time of this map, which other chapters definitely lack. Other than Chapter 4, like most of the other chapters don't really have much map evolution overall. Like, they just remove locations or just nerf them to the point where you don't really get the sense that the map is evolving over time. Season 9 is my favorite season of all time. I think it's the best season simply because it had World Cup, which introduced a loot pool that was incredibly fun to play with. They obviously wanted to have a really good shotgun this season, so they introduced the combat shotgun, and even though right now it's the tickle gun, at the time during Season 9, this shotgun was devastating. Also, spray meta during this season wasn't as big of an issue, and the map changes being Neo-Tilted and Mega Mall were changes that I really liked. I think Mega Mall was a way better version of Retail, and while I didn't care for Neo-Tilted as much, it was still a good map change. Season X is a horrendous season. It's the first horrendous season pretty much in the list, simply because there were mechs. Obviously, there was a lot of other changes during the season, like the fact that they had a lot of map changes and loot pool changes that I didn't like the removal of the changes to Neo-Tilted and Mega Mall, but they also removed stuff like the combat shotgun from the loot pool, And they added a bunch of gimmick POIs, like the fact that you couldn't crouch in moisty palms without turning into an object was just stupid. Or the taco time in Greasy Grove, which most people remember as being really silly. Fucking taco time! Season 1 of Chapter 2 is another really bad season simply because nothing got changed throughout the entire season. Now the main reason I'm not putting it in the horrendous category is because this season does two things right. It has a really good map and a really good loot pool. Also, there are good mechanic changes with the addition of swimming as well as the fact that they added boats. But other than this was a 128-day long season, and the only thing we had to show for it was content creators making fashion shows and a harpoon gun, which wasn't that crazy. Season 2 of Chapter 2 definitely had a pendulum shift. This is one of my favorite seasons of all time. I think it's at the back of amazing. This season really only struggled with the fact that I didn't care for the AIs. It improved upon the map that was already really good, and it made the loot pool better with the addition of the mythics, which I really liked. And overall, I didn't care for some of the locations on this map, but I can't really say any of them were bad. Season 3, I think, is kind of mid. The main reason is because I don't care for the loot pool during this season, which removed the pump and added the charged, which actually, at the time I didn't really like because I wasn't familiar with the gun. And I didn't really care for all the water being all over the map. Like, it was nice that they allowed you to build in it, but it just made fighting in most scenarios incredibly awkward. Also, by the time the season was over, they'd pretty much removed every good change from the prior one. Season 4 is one of my favorite seasons once again. I think this one's slightly better than Season 4 of Chapter 1. I think the pump charge shotgun meta is the best shotgun meta we have ever seen, and it's unfortunate that we haven't had one like it. The only thing I didn't like about this season was the addition of the tickle gun. This gun essentially looks like the combat shotgun but isn't, which is why they call it the tickle gun. Now, Season 5 is one of my least favorite seasons of all time. It only gets beat by one. This season had a horrendous map because it changed every single change from the prior seasons.
You can't keep getting away with it! You can't keep getting away with it!
And the loot pool was not fun. The fact that the tactical shotgun was the best shotgun you could use during this season is really sad. The lever wasn't good. I don't care what people say. The shotgun took everything from the pump that was bad and everything from the tac that was bad and made it into a shotgun. It was terrible. Please stop defending it. Season 6 is bad, and I would say it's slightly better than Season 1 of Chapter 2 simply because it has actual changes during the season. The content isn't amazing, but it's better than nothing, and considering the fact that it did have the pump, and overall a relatively normal loot pool despite the fact that it had the primals and the makeshift weapons, I would probably say it's only slightly better than Season 1 of Chapter 2. Season 7 is another season I don't really care for. I have a hard time putting this one any higher than Season 6, simply because I didn't care for the map changes, which basically meant that they reverted everything once again. Like, this literally looks like Season 1, minus like a few changes. And the railgun with the scanner recon weapon were incredibly annoying. Season 8 of Chapter 2 was also not a great season. I would say this season was probably horrendous. Now, the main reason I can't put this season any higher than horrendous is because neither the map or the loot pool were good. I didn't like any of the Venom items or weapons, and I absolutely hated the map. There were no changes during this season, and the stuff that they did just made the game not fun to play. The only thing I liked about this season, the one singular thing, was the fact that they had late game arena, and that was it. Still a better end season than Season X though. Chapter 3 Season 1 is a horrendous season. This season's only slightly beat by Chapter 2 Season 5. The loot pool during this season was probably one of the worst loot pools of all time. And despite the fact that it had a good map and the Spider-Man mythics were fun to use even though they were broken, this season was terrible. Season 2 is slightly better than Season 1 because it fixes the shotgun problem that it has, but the map somehow gets worse during the season and it still has a lot of spray meta problems. Season 3 of Chapter 3 is a bad season, but I don't really think it's as bad as any of the seasons that I have listed in the bad category. Its loot pool isn't great and the map is okay, but they did fix a lot of the spray meta problems during this season, making it the best season of the chapter, because Season 4 of Chapter 3 is easily the worst season of all time. Season 4 of Chapter 3 has a absolutely god-awful loot pool. It has terrible map changes, with a map that progressively gets worse over time, and perhaps the worst live event that we will ever see.
everyone. I hope to see you on the other side.
Fucking hell. Oh, it's time for the black hole event to come back. Oh my god, are you shitting me? Obviously, the live event didn't impact actual gameplay, but I think it's worth talking about that this live event was awful. Like, there was nothing about it that was good. It was a massive social event where you essentially ran around doing quests the entire time. That was Epic Games' idea of a good event. Chapter 4 Season 1 is a season that I think is good, but I don't really want to put it any higher than any of these simply because I don't care for the map. I think the Chapter 1 map is way better than the Chapter 4 map, but the loot pool for Chapter 4 is definitely really likable, and a lot of the changes they do throughout this chapter, at least so far, I've really liked. Chapter 4 Season 2 is another season that improves upon the map once again. I think the addition of Mega City, as well as that whole kind of bottom right corner of the map, just got revamped in a way that is definitely better than the Chapter 4 Season 1 map. I would say it's slightly worse than Season 6, only because I think the Chapter 1 map is still slightly better. Now, Season 3, I think as of currently, is only slightly worse than Season 2 of Chapter 4. And this mainly has to do with the fact that I'm not a big fan of the lever being in the game again. I think it only serves the purpose of muddying up the loot pool. I think some of the map changes are good, but some of them are just kind of not. Like, I like the whole area being slightly less elevated than the rest of the map, and the idea of making it a jungle theme again is interesting, but I've never entirely agreed with changing the center of the map. I think it should stay relatively the same. When you end up changing the center, you lose the opportunity of being able to do some kind of massive live event there by the end of the chapter, which I think should always be the case, because it kind of stands out more when you have the end of the chapter event in kind of a central location for everyone to view. Again, not a huge gripe, but the changes during this season, at least as far as the map goes, are good. Like, this is still definitely a better version of the map than Season 2 is, in my opinion. I just don't care for the loot pool as much. I know I rushed through some of the seasons when putting them into this tier list, but I wanted to explain exactly why I'm doing this. As I explained, I want to give you an idea of where I stand on these seasons, and while I gave mostly my basic thoughts on each season, it's important to critique these seasons when they do something wrong. Even if you are someone who enjoyed playing Season 1 of Chapter 3, which is completely fine, that doesn't make the season objectively good just because you happen to not be bothered by the horrendous loot pool. It's important to remember that when talking about what makes a season good or bad, I make sure to take everything into account, and that's why I plan to make future videos on these seasons that you might have questions about. So if you don't want to miss those videos in the future, I would recommend subscribing. I will be making a video on every single one of them at some point, as well as still continuing to review new seasons as they come out. Anyway, thank you for watching and have a good day.